The morning of January 9th in San Francisco was cold and crisp, a typical winter day in the city. The streets of the North Beach neighborhood were bustling with life. Tourists wandered through the vibrant streets, taking pictures of the towering buildings and quirky shops, while locals went about their daily routines. At the heart of it all stood Collier Gwynn's Art Gallery, a modern establishment that had become a staple in the neighborhood. For years, Gwynn had built his reputation as a respected art dealer. His gallery was a beacon of culture, attracting affluent collectors, artists, and socialites. The long-standing business had earned him a position of prominence, and he took pride in his curated collection of contemporary pieces. But despite the gallery's success, a growing issue was starting to sour his relationship with the community: homelessness. For months, a homeless woman known as Maggie had been a familiar figure in front of Gwynn's gallery. She was often seen sitting on the sidewalk, her weathered clothes blending with the street's grime, her face a mix of exhaustion and despair. Maggie, who was known by some locals, had made the corner near the gallery her regular spot. She never asked for help, yet there she remained, day after day, a constant presence that Gwynn could not ignore. Gwynn's patience with Maggie had been tested over time. At first, he had tried to approach the situation with empathy. He had offered her food and a bottle of water, hoping that she would simply move on. But Maggie didn't respond the way he had hoped. She seemed uninterested in his gestures, her eyes often vacant, as though she was living in a world all her own. As the weeks passed, Gwynn's frustration mounted. His gallery was becoming less popular, and he blamed Maggie for the disruptions. The once pristine front of the gallery now seemed sullied by her constant presence. People who had once been excited to visit the space now hesitated, reluctant to walk past Maggie's spot. The idea of a peaceful, art-filled experience was becoming harder to reconcile with the reality of the streets outside. Gwynn tried various methods to deal with the issue. He had called local authorities, asked social services for help, and even put up signs asking for people to move along. But nothing seemed to work. Maggie never moved from her spot, and each failed attempt to remove her made Gwynn more bitter and resentful. The situation reached its boiling point one cold morning when Gwynn arrived at his gallery, ready to begin the day. Maggie was sitting as usual on the sidewalk outside. She didn't look up as he approached, and something inside Gwynn snapped. He felt as though he had reached his limit. This woman had been there for months, and no matter what he did, she wouldn't leave. With a determined look, Gwynn marched to the back of the gallery, grabbed the garden hose and turned on the water. He wasn't thinking clearly, his mind clouded with anger. He walked back to the front of the gallery, pointed the hose at Maggie and began to spray her with water. Maggie didn't initially react. She looked up slowly, her eyes blinking in confusion, but she didn't move. The cold water splashed over her, soaking her clothes, drenching her with every passing second. Gwynn didn't stop. The cold stream of water hit Maggie's skin, and for a moment, the only sounds in the street were the hissing of the hose and the shock from onlookers. Unbeknownst to Gwynn, the act of cruelty didn't go unnoticed. A woman walking her dog on the opposite side of the street had seen the entire thing. Shocked, she immediately pulled out her phone and began recording. As she stood across the street, the camera caught Gwynn, drenched in the reality of his actions as he continued to spray water at Maggie. The woman's hands shook as she focused the camera, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "What is he doing?" she whispered under her breath as she filmed the scene. She could barely believe her eyes. The woman she had walked past countless times was now the target of this blatant mistreatment. As the footage continued, it captured every detail of the incident. The water splashing against Maggie's clothes, her expression of bewilderment, and the coldness in Gwynn's face. The woman filming quickly uploaded the video to social media, where it began to spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. It didn't take long for the video to go viral. Within hours, it had been shared by hundreds of people on social media platforms. The world was watching as the video spread across the internet, showing the shocking behavior of Collier Gwynn. Hashtags like #JusticeForMaggie and #CompassionOverCruelty exploded across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. People from all walks of life expressed their outrage. "How can someone be so heartless?" one user commented. "This is beyond inhumane," another wrote. The more the video circulated, the louder the calls for accountability became. Gwyn's actions had not only disgusted his own community but had also caught the attention of local leaders and activists. San Francisco's mayor, London Breed, quickly condemned Gwyn's actions. In a public statement, she emphasized the need for compassion and dignity toward the city's most vulnerable residents. "This behavior is unacceptable," Breed said. "Every individual deserves to be treated with respect, no matter their circumstances." In the days that followed, protests erupted outside of Gwyn's gallery. Activists and concerned residents gathered in front of the building, demanding accountability. Signs with messages like "Not in our community" and "Respect the homeless" filled the streets. Some people were chanting, others were simply standing in solidarity with Maggie. It wasn't just the homeless advocates who were upset, it was everyone. Locals who had once enjoyed Gwyn's gallery now felt betrayed by his actions. People were angry that he, a figure of cultural influence, had treated a human being with such blatant cruelty. They wanted him to answer for it. The protests continued day after day, growing larger as more people learned about the incident. Gwyn's once thriving gallery became the site of daily demonstrations. As the pressure mounted, Gwyn's reputation, built over years, began to crumble. As the protests outside his gallery grew, so did the financial repercussions. Online reviews flooded in, and they were nothing like the glowing recommendations he had once received. Hundreds of people shared their disgust over the incident, leaving negative comments on platforms like Yelp and Google. Gwyn's art gallery, once a high-end establishment, found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare. Art collectors who had once been proud to associate with him now distanced themselves. Event planners who had booked exhibitions in the past canceled their contracts. His carefully crafted image was shattered, piece by piece, and all of it seemed to happen overnight. As the public outcry continued, the legal system began to take notice. The San Francisco Police Department launched an investigation into the incident. After reviewing the video and speaking with witnesses, they arrested Gwyn and charged him with misdemeanor battery. The charges reflected the seriousness of his actions, underscoring the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. While some felt that Gwyn's punishment was justified, others felt that it was a reflection of the deep issues surrounding homelessness in the city. His arrest became a symbol of a larger societal problem: how the homeless were being treated and how people in positions of power were held accountable for their actions. In the wake of the controversy, Maggie, the woman at the center of the storm, was offered support from local outreach programs. After the incident, activists and service organizations rallied around her, offering resources, food, shelter, and medical care. Maggie's life, while still uncertain, was now surrounded by a network of people who cared. Many were shocked by how the video had sparked a larger conversation about the lack of adequate resources for the homeless, and they were committed to providing real, long-term solutions. For Maggie, the days of sitting on the sidewalk feeling ignored were over. She was finally seen, finally heard, and finally offered the help she so desperately needed. Gwyn's actions had left an indelible mark on the community. His reputation was ruined, and his gallery was forever associated with his cruelty. While he faced legal consequences, the larger issue of homelessness remained unresolved. The debate around Maggie's mistreatment reignited conversations about the need for compassion, mental health services, and affordable housing in San Francisco. The incident had opened a painful chapter in the city's ongoing struggle with homelessness, but it also served as a call to action. People were now more determined than ever to push for change, ensuring that something like this would never happen again. For Gwyn, the lesson was clear. Cruelty, no matter how hidden or justified in one's mind, always finds its way to the surface. And when it does, it will be met with the force of a community that refuses to tolerate injustice.